before you had pockets here and there, you had different organizations, but it wasn't across all levels and across all different organizations that everyone was using digital tools to improve the way they collaborated. And COVID-19 has actually accelerated that adaptation process into using digital tools to get work done. So in terms of what kind of the business landscape and where we are, is that we are in an unprecedented opportunity to understand that there's no way back, that now there's no excuse.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Engati Engage. I'm Aish, and for this episode, we have the pleasure of welcoming Luis Suarez. Before I dive in, remember to hit the subscribe button for more exclusive content from thought leaders from around the globe. Let's begin with a quick introduction of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform, available across 14 channels with 25,000 bots, created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has been recognized as a top platform by INC.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog and video channel and the Engati Engage podcast, receiving upwards of 300,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest. Luis Suarez works at PanAgenda as a digital transformation and data analytics advisor, a well-seasoned social and open business strategist and 2.0 practitioner with over 22 years of working experience on knowledge management, collaboration, learning, online communities, and social media for business. He is currently focusing on helping organizations make the most out of their own change initiatives and digital transformation programs through making sense of their own data, analytics, and visualizations. Welcome to the show, Luis.
Thank you, Ash. Thanks for having me. It's a real treat being here with you guys today. Here.
I'm so glad you. So before I start getting into the questions, I have an exciting announcement for you guys. We have just launched our newest ebook titled Getting to Normalcy, Work from Home to Return to Office. So my first question is, how has the business landscape changed with technology, and how significantly will it change post the pandemic?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question because, as a starting point, I don't think that anyone can deny that we live in extraordinary times, right, with the pandemic and everything else, and where for the first time ever, since we had access to technology and especially digital tools to get work done and collaborate more effectively, there's been a leverage where every single one that does knowledge work has actually been forced to work from home distributedly, right? That's something that didn't happen before. Before you had pockets here and there, you had different organizations, but it wasn't across all levels and across all different organizations that everyone was using digital tools to improve the way they collaborated. And COVID-19 has actually accelerated that adaptation process into using digital tools to get work done. So in terms of what kind of the business landscape and where we are, is that we are in an unprecedented opportunity to understand that there's no way back. That now there's no excuse anymore by anyone, and I include here knowledge workers, managers, senior managers. There's no excuse to go back to the previous normal life that we have where we didn't use technology, because now everyone has got the opportunity to use the tools and get work done. Obviously, some people succeed better than others. Some people are better than others at using the tools at best. But I think what is important now that was before different is that there's no longer an excuse for people not to say that they don't want to use digital tools, because we all collectively know that they have been using them for a number of weeks. I mean, I've been here in Spain, we've been in confinement, or I've been in confinement for over 2 months. And to me, in terms of the work that I do as a distributed knowledge worker myself, very little has changed. And I have been doing this for already 18 years. But it's been fascinating to see how everyone has been coming on board and how everyone has been doing something that I think is a bit weird, but understandable. And that is that everyone is trying to mimic exactly what was happening at the office and try to do it online. And that's a big mistake, because things work completely different. We cannot go from, if you were at the office, you would have like 6, 7, 8 hours of meetings every day. And then now it's 6, 7, 8 hours of meetings online every day. That's doing things wrong. it's essentially you're trying to just keep things going for as long as you can, thinking that you're going to go back to normal. There's no new normal. There's no old normal that we're going to go to. We don't know yet where we're on right now because there's still a little bit of uncertainty. But certainly the business landscape has changed forever, because right now no one will be able to come up with any excuse not to use digital. That's something that we didn't have before. That's gone now. Now the question now is, why and how can I best use the digital tools that I have at my disposal?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that before people would get by saying that it's not their thing, that they are too old for doing this kind of things, or they don't have the technologies in place, or they don't have the processes in place, and all of a sudden the pandemic has forced everyone to think different and do different.
Yes, I agree with you. I feel like a lot of the methods that we used to employ pre-pandemic, those are all obsolete now. Like, I wouldn't even say that 50% is. I feel like 90% of it is. Like, everything has changed.
And even more so, if you look into it, what is really interesting is that everyone, more or less, has adapted accordingly,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't see this catastrophic or you don't get that sense of a catastrophic failure in terms of people using the tools. Everyone has been using the tools more or less to the best of their abilities to get work done. So everyone has been doing virtual meetings, everyone has been using some of the various different cloud-based productivity tools or enterprise social networking platforms. So everyone more or less has been adapting quite nicely, which is important from this particular realization, is that when we really want to, we can adapt pretty nicely to whatever the actual working conditions. So it's not that we have got whatever other excuse, is that we ourselves are the ones who need to understand that if we have been doing it now, there's no excuse to then go back to whatever else we had before.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we didn't have before, right? That's unique. Everyone has been getting their own skin in the game to use these digital tools, understanding that to go back to whatever they had before, it would look silly to them, right? Like say, yeah, I'm going to go back to face-to-face meetings the whole day long, or using extensively email, or whatever other things that they were doing before. That's gone. That's
Mm-hmm.
and actually, it's gone because whoever says that they want to keep working that way, they will be looked at as silly
Mm-hmm.
compared to everyone else moving into this new wave of using digital tools.
It feels comparable to almost like learning how to swim. This pandemic kind of feels like someone has pushed you into the pool and you have to sort of figure out your way.
Absolutely, I mean, it's like, and I'm having lots of conversations with different people over the last few months, right? Since the pandemic kicked in. But that's exactly the reaction that people tell me. Yeah, I feel like someone has pushed me over to the shark tank, and there are sharks swimming around and they're about to eat me. And then I realized that, hey, this is actually not too bad. I mean, I remember how, beginning of March, something like that, when the confinement in different countries started kicking in, and there was this massive amount of online resources about how to work remotely effectively, how to host virtual meetings effectively. Everyone all of a sudden became an expert in telling people how to work remotely, right? That lasted for about a week and a half. Then everyone was excited that they could do Zoom, they could do Slack, they could do Teams, they could do whatever else, right? And then a week goes by, then another week goes by, and then people started saying, I'm not sure that being on Zoom to Zoom meeting the whole day long is a good thing. And then about a month later, everyone was like, my God, like, no, I don't want to go and jump from one to the other. So that feeling of of jumping into the pool is exactly right. And just like swimming, once you learn how to swim, you'll never forget. And this is exactly the same. Once you learn how to use the digital tools, you will not forget how to use them. And the only thing that you can do is you can improve and do things better, just like you would improve your swimming skills.
Mm-hmm. I feel like if we were to, with all this information and with all the tech that we have available because of this pandemic, if we were to revert back to our normal selves, it'd be like going back into the pool with like floaties on. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. It's a great way of describing it. And interestingly enough, that's what I'm saying, that it would look silly to
Mhm.
say that once you learn to swim, say, no, I don't want to swim anymore. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, I think what is going to happen, and this is also part of the business landscape, is that some people would tell me or say that. So does that mean that everyone will want to work from home all the time from now onwards? And I said, well, probably not. I think that there will be a large chunk of the population of knowledge workers who would still want to go to the office, but not 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one or twice a week, and then hang out there with the colleagues, have coffee, go to the canteen for lunch and stuff, because they like and they want to have that face-to-face physical contact, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that what this situation with the pandemic has enabled is flexibility. So I think that we're going to see a lot of knowledge workers starting to ask their organizations, hey, can we actually work more from home than we do from the office? Because, I get a better sense of being more effective and productive, which you are, and maybe we can talk about that through the conversation and everything else. But eventually, what happens is that now people have got what they thought they didn't have before: flexibility. I mean, to give an example of how I translate this, I live in Spain. I'm originally Spaniard, and working from home here, so doing distributed work was a taboo topic because we live on a culture that is very much driven by presentism. So you need to show up at the office and you need to be there a number of hours and you need to do work or pretend that you do work, right? And it was very much ingrained in the culture, right? So, I mean, I remember, like I said before, I've been working distributedly for 18 years, of those 16 years here in the Canary Islands where I live, right? And I remember how my colleagues from one of the main offices in Madrid, they were always reluctant as to why do I work distributedly? Why don't I go to the Madrid office and work from there, right? So I always had to justify my own existence in terms of the work that I did and how I worked and the results that I delivered and everything else. And so that culture was very much ingrained about always being present, right, at the office. Fast forward 2020, pandemic, COVID-19, everyone is working from home and everyone is going saying like, this is not bad actually.
Yeah.
Obviously it's extraordinary circumstances. Is we're going through a pandemic, so we need to ensure that our families are safe and our kids are still doing their homeschooling in best conditions they can. We need to look after our elderly, risk groups, whatever. All of that is going on at the same time. But also people are thinking like, hey, this is actually not that bad, right? And we have, one of the things that is happening now, a lot of governments are realizing that, and they are actually not just realizing, they're actually working through passing laws to consider working from home a right.
Mm-hmm.
That before was never even thought about.
Mm-hmm.
If someone would tell me, okay, working from home is now a right on your own good, I thought like, hello? No? I mean, I've been told that I need to go to the office. I said, well, not anymore now, right? Because of these extraordinary circumstances of how the business landscapes has changed so dramatically, right? I mean, even Nadella, right, a CEO from Microsoft, saying that they have seen how the digital transformation process has accelerated in 2 months, 2 years. And I will go, actually, I would think more like the 5 or the 10 years, because a lot of organizations have done more in 2 months around their digital transformation process and journey than what they have done in the last decade. I've been in the space for 23 years, so I've seen it. I've seen customers and organizations who are saying there's no way that we're going to use digital tools because we're still dependent on this very much face-to-face kind of work mindset and everything else. And all of a sudden they're working all distributedly and they are coping with it relatively okay to understand that, hey, maybe we need to change the way we have been working so far.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you bring up the government because I've heard from a lot of people that the slowest industry to actually embrace change is the government. So the fact that there are being laws that are actually like laws are being written about making work from home a right is just it's incredible to me.
And that's actually, yeah, and you're absolutely right. That, and I have done knowledge management for those 23 years. That's actually the area that I specialized on. And one of the things that we used to say in the mid 90s around knowledge management is that the moment that government embraces knowledge management is dead because everyone else will have already done it because they're last ones to embrace whatever technology process and everything else. So when you have got governments that are saying, well, maybe we need to think about working from home as something that is considered a right for people, right? And that obviously enters also the territory where you need to have infrastructure, you need to have good telecommunications, you need to have good broadband connectivity, which means that you enter the territory of considering the internet as a necessity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Finland already done that for a few years, right? So in Finland, having a decent internet connection is a human right. right? And there are a lot of countries that are coming on board to that idea because they know that, and this is how also the business landscape has changed dramatically. Work has stopped being a physical space. Now it's a state of mind. It's
Mhm.
your mindset. You work whenever and wherever you need to work. Whereas before is, I need to go to the office and do my work there and then come back home and then my life will resume, right? No, now work happens wherever you are and with the tools that you have at your disposal. And nowadays we're lucky enough, unfortunately enough, to have lots of various different devices to keep us connected, laptops, tablets, mobile phones. We have got the digital tools in place. Some of them are better than the others, obviously, but we do have them, right? So, and what I keep telling people is that now that we're all on the same space, that's when the real fun starts, because what you do is you understand that this is not just about technology, this is also about changing the nature of work. So you start talking about culture, you start talking about mindset, behaviors, habits, processes, in terms of how they're all shaped completely upside down by the impact of these digital tools as the key enablers there they are. Now,
Mhm. Yes, I agree with you. Um, that's why we also released this ebook about
mhm,
getting back to normal. I'll get into more details towards the end of the video, but stick around till the end, and it's really exciting for more
mhm.
details. Stick around till the end. So, moving on to my next question, data driven decision support for the workplace. What do you see as the critical gaps and the trends in organizations? What are they looking for to leverage this data?
This is actually one of the areas that concerns me a little bit because I'm not seeing enough. I'm not seeing enough of organizations turning into data analytics as an opportunity to learn how this transition is going through, right? And I have been having a lot of conversations with different people, just this morning, even the last one, where someone was telling me, I admire your coherence and your consistency of telling everyone that we're not tapping into data analytics as much as we should, but sometimes we should see that there are challenges within organizations to tap into data analytics, right? Lack of funding, not enough resources, you name it, right? And I see that those are very valid points. I think that we have got that situation where analytics is not considered a business critical tool that can help me make better decisions, and that's what worries me. And it worries me in the sense that we seem to do a lot of decision making based on gut feeling versus facts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to talk about politics because politics is a different world, right? It's all very much more visceral and emotional and whatever. But when you look into the business landscape, the fact that businesses prefer to make decisions on their gut feeling and understanding of what's happening, like let's go and see where this goes, versus looking into data, right, and doing data analysis and sense making of that data analysis is really worrying, because it reminds me of a study that IBM did to CEOs many years ago, maybe like 7 8 years ago, where one of the key insights was that 50% of the decisions that CEOs were making were wrong because they had the wrong information. I bet that if that study would have been done today in 2020, where we have got a lot more information, where work is a lot more complex, more dynamic, more uncertain in a way of how things happen, especially with the pandemic, I would bet that that percentage is even higher, right? So it concerns me the fact that a lot of organizations are not tapping into data analytics to help them make better decisions. And frankly, the way things are going, I'm gonna blame one particular group that is not doing their job. And I know that when folks listen and they belong to that group, they will feel very uncomfortable. But I think it is time that we put them on the spot for not doing the work that they're doing, and that's the IT departments.
Mm-hmm.
The IT departments are essentially acting like the gatekeepers that they once were in the mid 90s. They ban the use of tools because they are not secure, they're not private enough or whatever, like the recent situation with Zoom or whatever. But they're also not paying attention to the business. The business is demanding that they get analytics. The business is telling them, hey, you need to allow me to use the tools from a change management, adaptation process point of view. And IT is ignoring them like crazy. They are on these little tiny ivory towers ignoring the business in terms of what they're doing, right? And you may say, yeah, but there are exceptions of how IT teams are helping out. I say yes, but there are exceptions, not the common norm. The common norm is the IT teams, the IT departments should be going to the business every single day and ask the business, how can we help you?
Mm-hmm.
What data do you need to make better decisions? And right now, that's not happening. Right now, the IT departments are sitting in their own little caves and they're trying to make things work with accessibility, with ensuring that the tools are up and running and everything else. But they're not helping the business do the best that the business can do, and that's a problem because there's this massive disconnect between IT and businesses that we didn't have that before. For instance, when you were, if you look into the enterprise social networking environment, so ESNs, with examples like I don't know, Yammer, uh, HCL Connections, Jive, Salesforce Chatter, SAP Jam, whatever. They were not responsibility for IT teams in general, right? They were either HR, marketing, sales, transformation office, you name it, right? But it looks like with these cloud-based productivity tools that we have nowadays, based on messaging and collaboration and chatting, that it has gone back to IT. And IT, instead of having learned their lesson from before on how bad it is to be a gatekeeper, they keep doing exactly the same stuff as in the mid 90s. The end result is that the business knows that they have got zillions of data entry points that they could have access to in real time to understand what's going on, and yet they don't get anything. And that's so frustrating for the
Right.
business because they know that the decisions that they're making, they're not based on facts. They're based on opinions and gut feelings. And boy, we all know where that ends up, right?
Yes, I agree.
So the message that I'm saying here in terms of that data-driven decision is to shake up a little bit of the space and tell IT to get their act together because the business needs them more than ever right now. Like I said before, we are in unprecedented times. We're in extraordinary times. I don't think an IT will ever have everyone online for so long to do business. And what do? They miss the opportunity of doing data analytics.
Mm-hmm.
That's mind blowing for me, right? And then people tell me like, "Hey, but you're tooting about your own work because you do a lot of data analytics, and you have solutions that do data analytics." And I said, "I don't care. Pick up whatever the vendor that brings you the value for bringing you the data visualizations that you want, or the dashboards, or whatever the access that you want. I don't care which one you use. Pick up the one that gives you the best value, but use them
Mm-hmm.
because right now you're sitting on a gold mine of data that no one knows anything about. And when everyone goes back to work, that data activity, that usage is gone. I mean, go back to work to the office because we're working on distributed, right? So when they go back to the office, the face-to-face interactions will kick in, which means that the amount of traffic online is going to disappear to a certain degree, right? And I keep telling people, every day that goes by where you don't do data analytics now during the pandemic is a wasted opportunity to justify your job for the rest of your lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And then people look at me like, that's a bit dramatic. I say, well, that's the opportunity that you're missing out. I'm sorry. How much bolder do you want me to put it, right? And again, what I think people are not understanding really well in terms of data analytics is that you're much more effective in making decisions with facts and data than with opinions.
Mm-hmm. That's something that seems really like that seems like that should be innate, but it's interesting that it's not. So I feel like my eyes have really opened up with this information.
Because I mean, it's if you look into it, a lot of organizations have been running their business on decisions made by people with not enough information.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask me, a lot of the issues that we have today with the pandemic, right? A lot of the challenges and everything else, they are provoked because people were not prepared before, right? And one of the things that I keep telling people is that if you're already late now coming on board, coming online, what you should do is you should not prepare for COVID-19. You should prepare for the next one, because as bad, as dramatic, as tragic as COVID-19 has been, I keep telling people that this is an appetizer. There are a larger threat. There's a larger threat out there that is going to hit us like crazy, and that's climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be the impact of that is going to be tremendous. So the situation is, are you willing to prepare for the next time that you need to move your entire organization online? And what decisions are you going to make based on data to help not suffer as much as you're doing now? I know a whole bunch of organizations that I have worked with over the years who have done their homework over the last decade, who have made the glitch overnight from office environment into online. And yes, there was a bit of disruption here and there, but in general, they made the switch with no problem. So when people tell me, okay, well, we're all suffering, I say, no, you are suffering because you wanted to. Because there are a lot of other organizations that are not suffering. They're actually thriving because they prepared and they were ready for it. To that move into the online world, into that so-called digital transformation. And it's taken them a few years to complete it because it's a long journey. We all know that. But once you need it, it's there. It's like when, for instance, people tell me like, hey, can you help me find a job, please? My first reaction to them is like, who are you? Are you part of my network? I say, no, I'm trying to build my networks now because I need help and I need support. I need to find another job. I said, you're like 20 years too late. And people tell me like, what do you mean? I said, well, you should network when you don't need your networks. You
Mm-hmm.
should build your networks, your professional networks, every single day when you don't need them, so that they have an opportunity to know you, to see who you are, to see whether they can trust you and whether they can work together with you. Because when you need their help, they will know you and they will come to your rescue. But if you're starting now because you need them, they will tell like you like, who are you? So this is exactly the same thing. The same thing I'm saying, you should start building into this digital transformation journey and process, not when you need it, when you do not need it, so that when you do need it, you're ready for it.
Mm-hmm. That's
And that's the impact of data analytics.
mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. It's actually, like I said, my mind has really just, it's opened up to all of this. So where do you think most of the resistance is coming from? You mentioned that one of the factors could be the fact that IT companies aren't as accessible, or they're kind of, there's some sort of resistance there. So what can we do better so that that sort of gap gets closed?
It's about the mindset. I mean, if you look into how people are embracing digital tools nowadays because of the pandemic, that resistance has been removed. Why? Because they know they don't have a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? And one of the things that I keep telling people about is that before, when there were a lot of organizations doing this so-called digital transformation, everyone had always the need to answer the question for the what's in it for me. And everyone was coming up with a different excuse as to why they would not do it. Our culture is not ready, our technology is not ready, we don't have the budget, we don't have the resources, we don't have the strategy, we don't have senior leaders, we don't have supporting us, we don't have XYZ, right? Um, that what's in it for me, which was basically a bunch of excuses, and I want to use on purpose excuses because if you look now into COVID-19, there's no longer an excuse, right? But I think that what's in it for me has changed completely from whatever we had before and what we have today, because all of those excuses, you can summarize them into one single what's in it for me nowadays with the pandemic, which is not dying. Either you as a knowledge worker or people around you who are part of risk groups like your parents, grandparents, uncle, aunts, you name it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that what's in it for me is unique now, right? It touches right to the core of who you are as a human being, right? Your family core, right? So in terms of that resistance, I would venture to state that we will see a lot less resistance from here onwards for people to adapt to these digital tools, because everyone understands that the culture has changed. The way we see work is different now. The way I see and interact with people is different. I no longer have to go into that physical space to do my work. Now I can do it digitally and get it done, right? So I think that the main reluctance that has always been coming through is essentially thinking that you no longer have an opportunity, or you didn't have an opportunity to use tools, when eventually it was more the mindset that was the main obstacle. And the other obstacle and the resistance, and this is something that I have been saying for many years, has always been management, especially senior management.
Mhm.
because they thought that it was not for them. They were too old, and this is just for the younger generations. The millennials and the Gen Z and whatever other moniker they use. And they said, I have got certain ways of how I do work, which is email, phone calls, meetings. Don't tell me anything else. And then obviously, these digital technologies, they challenge their strong sense of power and influence, right? Because they're no longer at the center. So they have always been a huge resistance, right? Guess what? COVID-19 has told them, hey, you need to be as digital as everyone else because otherwise you're going to be isolated at your home doing nothing. And they had to adjust like everyone else. And hey, they're all succeeding because I don't see any senior manager crying out loud, oh, this doesn't work. I'm so desperately in trouble. No, they have all continued doing their work, right? So what I think it is unique from nowadays versus before the pandemic is that everyone, and I want to stress this out again, everyone has been having their own skin in the game of using digital tools. Because before, a lot of these managers, they were at the office while you're working distributedly, and you had to report back to them, right? But now they're all working all over the place. So we're all distributed. So everyone is having and is seeing the same struggles, but also the same opportunities. And that's unique because that hurdle from management is no longer there. And the beautiful thing about it that I'm really excited about is that once we've are done with the pandemic and we go into the new normal, whatever the new normal is, it's very difficult, or it's going to be very difficult for a manager or a senior leader to tell their employees, let's go back to the old normal. No way. That's not going to happen because the employees are going to go like, why? Why do we need to go back to the old normal that brought us into the pandemic while we're still thriving on this new environment where we can see that we can be more effective, more productive, more interconnected, more hyper networked and everything else?
Mhm.
Why? So there's going to be an interesting conversation going to happen there in terms of mitigating that resistance. So the interesting thing, and this is funny because there are a number of different cartoons going out there about who provoked digital transformation, right? And you have got as choices, you have got CEO, CFO, and COVID-19. Yes, it's the pandemic that has
Mhm.
actually provoked that culture shift, right?
Mhm.
And rightly so. And the thing is, and the question is, will we have learned the lesson for the next time, right? And this is one of the things that I keep telling people that this is not going to be the last one pandemic. They're going to be a number more and a number of other catastrophes, and this is essentially going to help us prepare for the next one, whether we like it or not. And it's a choice that we need to make. That the resistance is about a choice, right?
Right.
If the choice is, do I want to keep neglecting what is obvious, or do I want to embrace the obvious? That work has finally shifted and changed forever. And that's a
Mhm.
choice that we all need to make.
I think one of the things you mentioned was even what's going to change is even the way we communicate with each other. So,
And that's a choice that we all need to make.
I think one of the things you mentioned was even what's going to change is even the way we communicate with each other. So you launched no email because most emails seem to be redundant these days. So how can organizations make their communication platforms more effective?
Well, I launched that in 2008, right? So that's 12
Oh,
years ago.
oh God.
So it's been going on for a while, right?
Mhm.
And I have not been bombarded as often as I do now in those 12 years in terms of people telling me, how can you survive without email nowadays?
Mhm.
When we're all working distributedly, we actually have a lot more email traffic than what we used to have at the office. And I go like, yeah, because what you guys is you're doing is you're trying to perpetuate a current status of what work used to be like. You still not have opened up to the world of working offline with different distributed technologies or social collaboration technologies that can allow you to basically reduce drastically the amount of email traffic, right? So one of the things that I keep telling people about is that welcome to my club. I founded it 12 years ago. I'm glad that you're on board on it now and you understand how pernicious email abuse is, right? And the way I try to frame it with organizations is that you need to figure out what is still helpful to use email for, right? What are the use cases for which you want to use email? And to me, I see three of them, right? Which is a universal identifier, like your user ID with a password. the email address, calendaring and scheduling of upcoming meetings, and maybe I'm saying maybe because there are other tools now that are capable, quite enough right now to do that. One-on-one confidential content,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when, for instance, HR shares your payslip, you don't want the world to know your payslip, right? So that's confidential, so you wouldn't share it. But everything else, there is no excuse why it cannot be shared in some of these collaborative tools. Whether it's cloud-based applications like Slack or Teams or WebEx Teams or Twist or whatever, or whether you want to use enterprise social networking tools like Yammer, HCL Connections, Jive, Salesforce Chatter, SAP Jam, or whatever else, or virtual meetings. If you're doing face-to-face real-time collaboration, right? So the thing is that what is important for everyone to understand is that we seem to think that email is not a choice. We
Mm-hmm.
all need to use it because everyone uses it. And what I try to introduce people to the notion of no email is that we do have a choice. We need to understand that email is very good for certain interactions, like the ones that I just mentioned now. But we also need to understand that there are so many other tools that are much more effective to get work done than what email says. A lot of people don't seem to remember this, but email was invented in 1971.
Right.
We are in 2020. The world has transformed tremendously since that time, right? So we don't seem to have adapted to the new times, to the new conditions, to the nature of work that's a lot more complex than it was before. The way I describe it, for instance, is that, back in those days, and I would say up to the mid 90s, you would typically work with one single team, one single project, one single manager in a small cubicle in an office, and that was it. Nowadays, you work in multiple projects, multiple customers, different managers, different tools available, different processes. So the whole nature of work has transformed itself. And yet, we still use email as the main collaboration tool. That's
Right.
a massive, epic failure of a culture shift that hasn't happened,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I see this with younger generations of the knowledge workforce. Because when they come into the workforce and they see how obsessed everyone is using email, they go like, email? That's what I use with my grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Especially
or
people.
that's what I do. That's what I use with my teachers. Like, come on, people, come into the 21st century, please. Like pronto, right? And what happens there is that they themselves are doing something that I think they should, but that they're not doing, which
Mm-hmm.
is they're not challenging the status quo. They're not challenging their senior colleagues and telling them, why you use email when we have got more effective tools to use. They prefer to conform rather than to challenge. And my advice to them has always been challenge. They need to work to your terms, not to their terms, because they're on the way to retirement. You still have got 40, 50 years ahead of you to do work. One of the things that I keep telling people, especially the younger generations, is that they don't realize that they will be living with, let's say that we have got a stable, you know, environment, both in our personal lives and work and everything else, right? So when everything is relatively stable, I keep telling people that, they don't seem to realize that the younger generations, they will live beyond the 100 years,
Mm-hmm.
which means that they will have to work for 50, 60 years more than what they're doing now. So if they don't have the ability to challenge the status quo now, imagine working like they do with this obsession on email for the next 60, 70 years that they have to do work, right? So I tell them, it's a time for you to challenge the notions of work and the status quo, because if you don't do it, no one else will do it. The older generations, they won't do it because that's what they have done. But they are 3, 5, 10 years ahead before they retire. And then you will still be stuck on email because you conform to it, right? So in the context of this situation now with the pandemic, where we have got all of these digital tools available, where we're all working distributedly, in the context of also no email, I say, like, use email for what it's really good at, but then explore how you could use all the digital tools to make you more effective. This is not about how you get work done so you can keep on like you were doing before. This is also about how do you get work done, but also the most important is how you have now the ability to transform the way you do work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see enough people doing that right now, which I'm hoping that it will come along, because people will realize that they cannot keep up having 3, 4, 500 emails every day now that no one sees them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's
For
not
sure.
sustainable.
Yeah, I think that's a common thing of my generation, at least. A lot of them just do not use email, like it's not in their vocabulary at all. And I think challenging the status quo is what has created all of these visionaries, like Steve Jobs, like Bill Gates, like even yourself, for example, for launching no email. Like no one could have foreseen in 2008 that email was going to be obsolete, but you've already done it now in 2020. So I think that's incredible. Like congratulations for that.
My pleasure. No, but hey, this is not necessarily about being that pioneer and doing that kind of thing and saying it. This is essentially about understanding that things were not working
Hmm.
and that things were to the point of saying, we need to stop. I mean, when I was starting, I remember when I was starting this no email thing, I was doing tons of research about the pernicious effect of using email in our brains, right? To the point of provoking a lot of the stress and anxiety that we have been having over the years in terms of not being able to cope with it, right? So, in a way, it literally is killing us. That's what I said. Like, stop the nonsense. No work tool should kill us.
Hmm.
No, we should actually enjoy and use and enjoy the tools that help us be more productive. And email, frankly, is no. I don't know anyone who loves email. Let me put it that way. I don't know anyone who tells me, "Hey, I'm in so much more love with my email that I spend 10 hours, 12 hours every day doing email." Do you know anyone like that?
Can't say I do, to be honest.
Right. So that already tells you something about what
I
needs
feel
to
like
happen.
I actually see a lot of people getting more stressed out about emails. Like they get super anxious when it comes to writing to their seniors, like their bosses, their professors for students in universities. So yeah.
Because they basically figured on and they basically realized that they need to put on a mask when writing that email to pretend to be who they're not.
Hmm.
Big mistake,
Hmm.
right? Don't try to be who you're not. That's useless and a waste of time.
Yes, I agree with you.
Mhm.
So, what are your thoughts on conversational intelligence for customer service?
I think that we have got a very interesting time ahead of us and an opportunity because one of the things that I'm saying that a lot of organizations have realized is that humans are contagious, right? So they spread germs, and some of them are very, like COVID-19, right? So I think that what a lot of organizations have realized is that a lot of knowledge work can be done digital, right?
Hmm.
Like we're demonstrating every day. But they also understood that a lot of work can actually be automated, and it can be automated in multiple different ways. And what I have been telling people all along when since the pandemic started is that businesses are going to accelerate that automation process, whether it's through chatbots, whether it's injecting machine learning, whether it's automating processes through a lot of different workflows that are in place. I think that we're going to see how, and this is what I'm really excited about, because by businesses now forcing to automate what they should have automated already 15 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago, now it's going to become a priority, which means that it's going to free up humans to no longer have to do seriously boring, dull stuff,
Hmm.
right? The stuff that can be automated. Now, this is going to be a very interesting space for, chatbots and machine learning and everything else, because it's going to swallow a huge amount of tasks that before were done by humans with all our flaws, right? And what happens then is that that frees up the human brain to do something that they should have done before, which is focus on the skills that machines and automation cannot do, like creativity, like critical thinking, like sense making, like networking, like communication, like knowledge sharing, and everything else, right? So we're going to focus more on those skills that we have been neglecting for too long because we have been trying to automate ourselves when we cannot automate ourselves, right? And this is where I see a huge opportunity for conversational bots, and especially from customers and interacting with customers, because right now that's not happening, and a
Hmm.
lot of the interactions that are taking place are very simplistic in my opinion, right? And also we have not been challenging enough as to how much we can truly automate and get rid of it. I mean, get rid of it in quotes, obviously, because some of those are related to critical processes that we can do, but they can be automated. So let's go and automate them. What I do see, though, as well as an opportunity, is that a lot of these conversational bots, they have got this huge opportunity to automate, but they also have got a big challenge, and especially in the times that we're living now. And that's how a lot of them, they don't seem to have developed a strong sense of empathy, right?
Mm.
I keep telling people that if there's one skill that especially, excuse me, managers and senior leaders need to develop, is empathy, right?
Yes.
So basically, put yourself in the shoes of someone else to understand why they're going through what they're doing.
Mhm.
I'm hoping that those conversational pods do that as well, because right now, I don't see a lot of work in that space about how do you become more empathic about what the customer is going through, what the employee is going through, and how you can bridge that into providing and delighting the customers with the experience that they deserve, right? So I think that
Mhm.
in that space, I'm excited about their potential of freeing up, excuse me, of freeing up knowledge workers to do knowledge work. And also, I see the opportunity for these conversational bots to become a lot more empathic and engaging versus just the transactional back and forth, which is helpful up to a point, right? But
Yes, I
not
agree.
entirely.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of companies are realizing is this, and I think that's why they're starting to employ more chatbots with sentiment analysis or natural language processing. I think that so that they can actually understand and empathize with the customer.
Right, which is rightly so. I mean, like I said before, and this, if you tie that in to how critical data analytics is, that's actually where you can inject a lot of machine learning to learn how the interactions have been with customers from over the years, not just months, from over the years, draw common patterns and build them into those chatbots so that you help understand more of the customer journey. But you also understand as well that in order for you to be successful, you need to look into the customer's needs, not your needs. And I think that that's what's missing for most vendors, that they look more for themselves than the actual needs of the customer.
Hmm.
And customers notice that. Customers see that. And I said, if you're only looking for your needs, you're wasting your time with me, right? I need you to show me that you're willing to work with me, co-create with me, learn with me, help me, sell me the products that I really need, not the stuff that you need to make a sale for, right? I think we're going to see a lot more of that evolving, and why I see the critical role of how analytics helps those chatbots and machine learning injected into it to become a lot more effective, because eventually it's all about how much you learn in terms of how people behave the way they behave and how you can then apply it, right?
Yeah, I think chatbots and intelligent bot agents and automation, they're going to become a key differentiator in understanding a customer and making a company more customer centric.
I agree. Which eventually, if you ask me, that's one of the things that I have been telling people about, is that a lot of the vendors, a lot of the IT vendors especially, they are vendor centric, they're not customer centric. And then people tell me, why did they struggle? And I say, well, because they're looking at their belly button, they're not looking at the customers.
Hmm.
It's that simple, right? Is the moment that you make the switch and you start thinking more about the needs of your customer versus your own needs, that's when you realize about all the time that you have been wasting all along.
Hmm. I agree with you. So, what are your key focus points when advising any company to adopt a social media strategy?
Start with the why. I always tell people, find your purpose, because a lot of organizations keep doing stuff with technologies thinking that it's just another green check on their spreadsheet, or it's something that they have been told that they need to do, and then people will flock to them, and you say, you put the tools in there and everyone will come to it. No, things don't work like that. You need to, the strategy needs to start in terms of defining what the purpose is, like why, and why and what do I want to achieve, right? And typically that's something that you can correlate to how the business works. Do I want to have better products? Do I want to have better customer satisfaction? Do I want to have better retention rates or attrition rates, reduce them to a level? Do I want to improve the way people collaborate? Do I want to improve the sense of belonging and commitment and involvement from the employee? The so-called employee engagement. So figure out why you want to do what you want to do it, and then from there it's do a bit of an introspective exercise of identifying how do you want to move different kinds of interactions, processes, use cases into the various different digital tools that you may have available.
Mm.
The one size fits all, that's a myth.
Oh.
We're trying to live with that 15 years ago. 15 years later, we have proved that it's a failure, right? Why?
Mhm.
Because different people have got different needs, wants, and different ways of working.
Mm-hmm.
So every organization has got a plethora of collaborative tools. And it's not about which one is better than the other. It's about how one can help the other. How can one augment the other based on the use cases of what I have to do, right? So part of what the strategy that I tell people about is that you need to build a solid library of use cases that you can then match to digital tools,
Mm-hmm.
right? Part of that strategy as well should be having a very powerful governance model, right? Where you tell people these are the rules. No, you don't say that. You tell people these are the guidelines under which we operate. You don't mandate. You inspire. You persuade people into doing things, right? You are actually a much more successful if you persuade people than if you force people, right? But the governance model actually helps you establish what are the guidelines under which we all operate, the constraints in a way, right? So when you look into the strategy, start with the why, the what, the purpose. The governance model is really important. The use cases, and also what I will include there is help people understand how they can use the tools. So do a lot of enablement, a lot of support, a lot of education. This is not about how you use the tools. This is, click here to upload a file. No. Or click here to tag someone. No, that's not about that. It's about educating people on how they can build and model new behaviors and habits. For example, working out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Very few organizations are working out loud. And yet is one of the most powerful business practices when using enterprise social networking tools. Why? Because you make a lot of knowledge available openly and freely for everyone else to benefit from, right? So when you do that enablement as part of that strategy, it's all about helping people not how to use the tools, but build those new behaviors, those new habits, right? Another part of the strategy, which I would include, is don't feel that you're doing this alone because you're not. Within every organization, you have an army, a small army or flat army, whatever you want to call it, of champions, of advocates, of super connectors, of people who live in this world that you're trying to move into already, right? The so-called, as you mentioned earlier on, the so-called pioneers. So mobilize them, give them a sense of purpose. Give them a sense of purpose of telling them, hey, we're putting a community together for you guys to get together because we want you to help us transform the organization. Who's going to say no to that?
Mm-hmm.
No one. They will all flock literally to you to tell you, hey, what can I do to help? And that's when you start moving forward, right? And then finally, part of that strategy, which is something that I have been telling people as well a lot about, is analytics. Don't underestimate the ability to understand what's going on by facts and data, not by opinions or
Mm-hmm.
gut feeling alone, right?
Agreed, agreed.
Now we have got the ability that we can do that analysis in real time. So the employee surveys that we used to do once a year or every 3 months, those are a thing of the past. Now we can actually query through, you mentioned earlier on sentiment analysis. We can query that in real time and see what's going on with the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why you want to do that is because once you have got this strategy in place, you can adapt to it as you move forward. You
Yes.
can, you can, the model that Dave Snowden is using is you basically probe, sense, and respond, right? So and this is essentially what data will do. It will help you understand whether you're in the right direction, and if you are, keep going full throttle. But if you're not, to stop, reflect, fix what doesn't work, iterate again, do more data analytics, ensure that you're going back into your course and keep pushing through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the key elements that I would include on that social media strategy. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I would start. Obviously, there are a whole lot more things, but that those to me are the core basic pillars of how people can go forward.
Mm-hmm. I think data, which is something that's quite empirical, like that's something that's very driven. It helps us in understanding like almost a customer's emotional needs. I think right now a lot of companies well, not a lot of companies, but a lot of customers and potential customers, they have this need they want to feel valuable, they want to feel needed. So I really feel like data can help us in achieving that sort of need for the customers.
And it's essential in one single key metric that we keep forgetting, which is customer centric.
Yes.
How much customer centric we are. I mean, I was talking earlier on about vendors, especially in the IT space, but even organizations themselves with their own customer base, they're not customer centric. They are their own base. They are organization centric to themselves. So they want to meet their needs first before they meet their customers. right? And through data, you can actually prove how you can transition from one space to the other, and how
Mhm.
you can stick around becoming that customer centric, and build an essential, I don't know, community of customers that you can work with. And eventually is what you do. You build community around your customer base.
Mhm.
Not about your products. It's about the experiences that you help customers build with your products. That's what most people seem to keep forgetting about, why customers use certain products, right? And if you look into how we use some of the consumer products, whether you're using a mobile phone for whatever the actual provider or whatever, you don't use it because you're using a mobile phone. You use it because it provides you an excelling, delightful user experience, which is why you're glued to the mobile phone. So why not to work tools? Why not to products? Why not to services?
Right. I think nowadays also people want to use they want to use products they sort of identify with, like products that give them a sense of identity. So,
Correct. And a sense of a higher purpose, right?
right.
It's not just about using products for the sake of the products. Is, what can I build with this product that you're trying to sell me? How can I become better at what I do, or how can I then do better service to my own customers with the products that you're trying to sell me? I think that's a conversation that wasn't happening before as often as it should, and I think that everyone is questioning that now, because we understand that the game has changed completely, and that
Yes.
we need to rethink about how digital is transforming that entire customer journey.
It's completely changed.
Yeah.
It's I'm really looking forward to it though. Like I
I
think there's
mean,
a lot of
if you look into it, if and I'm sorry to interrupt for a minute, but I thought I'll throw this in here. If you look into it, a lot of the sales process that is going on so far was happening through face to face, right?
Mhm.
You go to the customer, meet the customer face to face, and then you do short. You basically share out loud whatever you need to share, right? Sometimes it stick, most of the times it doesn't. But you realize that that face-to-face interaction does no longer work online, and that you actually need to use completely different narratives, completely different ways of engaging your customers in dialogues that before
Mhm.
were not even possible through face-to-face interactions.
Mhm.
So, and that's why we start questioning the way we would want to keep up with those relationships, because so far they didn't work.
I think this is also where chatbots come in, because I think they can really help out in those in closing, well, not closing sales, but it can at least start the sales journey, and it definitely helps in understanding the customer, what they want, and it's much more comfortable. I feel these days. I think a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, but some people are tend to get a bit uncomfortable talking to a sales agent just right off the bat trying to make a sale. I think chatbots are definitely going to help out with.
True, but let me also put the customers on the spot a little bit. Yeah, because just like we're saying that customers need to become, just like we're saying that organizations and vendors and all that stuff need to become more customer centric, customers need to be a bit more open to
Mhm.
dialogue and conversation, because many times you will see how a lot of people would tell you that they're trying to get a conversation going with the customer, and the customer ignores them. They don't respond to anything that they have been trying to, whatever the tools that they use, whether it's LinkedIn, even email, phone calls, social networking tools, or whatever. So customers have basically locked down into this 1 meter thick wall, saying, I don't want to talk to anyone, right? uh, I keep telling customers in that regard, if you want people to be customer centric, you are the one who needs to open up. You are the one who needs to engage in the dialogue to see how far those folks are willing to go and walk on your road. Because if you're basically locking out, then people will not come across you. They will not get across. They will not go and say, hey, here's how I can potentially help you if I understand your needs and wants, right? So customers also need to stop being so locked down on themselves, and they need to start looking up and talk to other customers about what they're doing, and talk about the various different folks and see what they have to offer and everything else. Because at the end of the day, if you look into it, it's all about the value that you can add to the customer. But if the customer is not willing to engage on finding out what that value is, we got a problem. And the problem is that we can never become customer centric if the customers themselves don't want to become customer centric. And that's a huge problem that customers need to fix for themselves,
Mhm.
right? And that's the opportunity that we have now when digital is reframing entirely everyone's positions, including that one of customers, as to how open they want to be and they should be.
Yes, I completely agree with you. So moving on to my last question,
Mhm.
Lewis, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
I do a lot, but I'm gonna keep it short, right? I would just basically say that as much as we are understanding that we live in extraordinary times, um, if we have if there's anyone listening to the recording and everything else, if you haven't had a chance to put on the table the topic of transforming the organization, now today is the time to start, right? This is not about how you can keep work going. This is not about how resilient you are, right? Because pretty much every organization has demonstrated a level of resilience, right? Whether it's really high, medium, relatively low, whatever, but we all somehow have got a resilience level. But I don't see many organizations aiming at transforming the way they work. If they want distributed work to succeed, it needs to be part of the core of the business.
Mhm.
It needs to be part of people understanding that work does no longer happen as a physical space that you go to. Work happens in your mindset,
Right.
right? What is the state of mind? And you need to prepare for that, right? Like I said before, this pandemic is an appetizer of what's to come. We're still even in the midst of it. We don't even know when we're going to go back to whatever sense of new normal that we will have, right? It can take a month, it can take 2 more years, right? So we have that opportunity that while we are in these times to explore. So one of the things, and I'm going to finish up with that. One of the things that I would strongly recommend organizations to do is to have two teams in place, right? One of them that helps go through this crisis, right? So the ones that keep the business running because we need to keep the businesses running, but at the same time have another team that observes what's going on, that captures the best practices. And
Mhm.
sorry, I don't believe in best practices. Let me rephrase that. Good practices, emerging practices, right? Things that work really well, but also things that don't work really well, so that when you go into a more stable environment, you can get rid of those practices that didn't work because you saw them, because you actually captured them, and then the ones that really worked out, right? So that's the strategic team that can help you understand the stories that you need to communicate, you need to socialize, and you need to build on for that next digital transformation journey that you will initiate afterwards. Because when we are in crisis mode, we only look into the crisis. Look like I can only look up to what happens next month, right? You need to have another team that looks into here's what we have learned in this unprecedented time of everyone going distributed and digital, and here's what we probably need to do next time around, right?
Mhm.
That team is essential. So if organizations don't have that team, start building it today and get them to work this week already.
Yes, I
Don't
completely.
waste a single day. And you don't have to put a lot of structure and over engineer processes. Just collect a bunch of, if you want them, the pioneers, the champions, the advocates, the people who are actually thriving in digital, and start telling them, start capturing stuff that you see that works or doesn't work, so that when we have the time to reconvene and look into the lessons learned of what we're going through, that we have got tons of data entry points and anecdotal evidence that can help us prepare for whatever comes next.
Mhm.
That's what I would recommend people nowadays.
So much. That's incredible advice. Thank you for giving us your time, Lewis. Your
My
insights
pleasure.
are really valuable. And I
My
know
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
thank you so much. And I think our audience is really going to enjoy this interview. So
Thank
if you
you.
stuck around for this long, we're really excited to announce that our ebook, Getting to Normalcy, Work from Home to Return to Office, is out and available for download for free. It's filled with checklists, considerations, and ideas so we can get back to normal, whatever our normal is going to be. So check the link in the description for more details. And be sure to subscribe. We'll be back with a new episode with a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned and we'll see you around for the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a good one, everyone.